Welcome to Lair the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, I have some very special guests with me as we are going to be doing my American Steel series. This is where we are going to put a spotlight on some slightly more obscure, off the beaten path American metal bands from the 80s that we think are really cool and that you should check out. All right, so let me introduce my special guests here today. Joining me is Lazerrus and Greeno. Both these guys have their own YouTube channels. They also do a YouTube show called The Man Cave of Doom. I have been a guest on their channels and at the Man Cave, and it was a blast. I had to get these guys here. So gentlemen, thank you for joining me here at the Lair.
Nice Thanks for having us, John.
Hell yeah.
Appreciate it, buddy.
All right, so like I mentioned, this is the American Steel here. We put a spotlight on some, a little bit more obscure 80s metal bands. So we're going to start with Lazerrus. What's your pick for their American Steel?
Well, I'll tell you, there was, when you first brought up the subject, I thought, number one, what an awesome subject. And this should be pretty easy. And then the more I thought about it, I thought, wow, okay, so strictly American. 80s, there's actually a lot to choose here. And so I kept bouncing around with a couple of bands, but then I thought, you know what? No, let me choose this. This band is a one and done. They did one album and that was it. And it's actually quite a shame because it is a gem of a record. And the band that I chose and the album is Ravage. And this is on Shrapnel Records. This came out in 1986. The title of the album is Wrecking Ball. And like I said, this is on Shrapnel Records. And Shrapnel Records is known primarily for being kind of guitar virtuoso artists that Shrapnel would like to produce. But they also did some incredible metal bands. Vicious Rumors is one. Griffin is one. There is some stellar titles on the Shrapnel label. Shrapnel is one of my favorite labels. So if you're into that, Metal Blade and
Combat.
Combat, labels like that, Shrapnel, which is a local label for me, right in Napa, California, which is where they were. And now I think they're back again. But so anyway, Ravage. So these guys, not to be confused with Ravage out of, I believe it was Boston. This band, they started out, the band was named Rampage, and that was in '82. And they cut a 2-track demo under that name, and that is just almost impossible to find now. And then in, I believe it was '83, '84, they temporarily changed their name from Rampage to Vice, like Miami Vice, but just Vice. And then when they signed with Shrapnel and actually cut this record, they changed their name yet again to Ravage. And this was the only record that they ever cut. It was re-released by Shrapnel in 2010 on CD with a couple of bonus tracks that were not released before. So I'd actually like to find that CD just to hear those 2 tracks. But a lot of people have classified this over the years as like early American power metal. I can see that maybe a little bit. I hear in this, there's definitely some early Def Leppard. There's some early Rat, but not that glammy type of Rat. It's really a lot heavier than that. This is, you guys know those movies, those heavy metal movies from the 80s? You know the ones I'm talking about? There's a slew of them, like, I don't know, Rock and Roll Nightmare, or, all these different. This record could be a soundtrack to any one of those movies. I mean, it is like the epitome of 80s underground metal, I guess. You know what I mean? It's not thrash, all right, but it is just that it's got that sound. the guitars, I'll show you the guys on the back here. You got Dee Dee Ran on guitar, single guitar player band. And Kyle Michaels is the lead vocals. And Kyle went on to do, he actually sang in the Geezer Butler band for a while. Dee Dee Ran, don't know whatever happened to him. The other guys, Jason Gray on bass and John Sweeney on drums, don't know whatever happened to those guys. But this album, when you hear this, it's hard to believe that this was a one album band. I mean, they had it. This band could have gone. I don't know what happened. I don't know the story to why they disbanded. But it is quite a shame because this is just a stellar of a gem. 86, mid 80s, phenomenal, straight, to me, straight heavy metal record. So out of Chicago, Illinois. And so I think there's some guys out there that like Vance, who would definitely probably know about this band. But on all of your Shrapnel releases, you know, this is one that you can still find today, and it's not expensive. You're looking at about a $20 record, and it's worth every penny. The one thing that I'll say about it is Kyle's vocals on here, he uses, outside of maybe a couple of tracks, he uses, which was typical at that time, a little bit of echo on his vocals, you know. The bass is very predominant and clear, driving, very big driving bass. Guitars, it's a single guitar band, but the way the album is recorded, you swear there's a 2 guitar attack coming at you on this record. Okay, so I don't know how they ever pulled that off live, because you definitely hear 2 guitar tracks on this record. So maybe that was the thing, is they were always wanting that second guitarist, and it never happened. But Kyle's vocals, the vocal track on this, on the production, is very out front. Okay, a lot of times, especially on metal records, the vocals kind of get evened out in the mix with the music, or even sometimes buried a little bit, and here they're very predominant, very out front of the music, which kind of gives this record a unique sound. But awesome album, just awesome album. So anybody out there wants that straight 80s heavy metal, and you've not heard this or checked these guys out, go find a copy of this. It was released by Shrapnel on vinyl, as well as cassette, and re-released on CD Digipack in 2010. So it is out there. It's not hard to get, but do yourself a favor. This belongs in every metalhead's collection right here, this album. Ravage, Wrecking Ball.
That's a cool pick. I mean, and I'm with you, man. I love those labels, the whole Shrapnel, Combat, Metal Blade, just all of that. Megaforce. You know,
Megaforce, yeah, all that stuff.
They were the heart of American steel.
Yeah. And Shrapnel, you know, you mentioned this, that a lot of people associate Shrapnel with the shred guitar instrumental stuff. You know, they discovered Yngwie Malmsteen, Mike Varney. Mike Varney, the guy that runs Shrapnel, used to have a column in Guitar Player magazine searching for talent, and that's how he found a lot of these hotshot young guitar players, one of them being Yngwie Malmsteen. Brought Yngwie over. One of his early releases was that Steeler record with Yngwie, but a lot of people just associate Shrapnel with instrumental guitar stuff, but there's a lot of cool little gems mixed inside there, you know, band albums. So it's definitely worth, like, you know, and a lot of them tend to be like that band, like kind of one and done type of bands, you know, but you'll find these little gems, and they all have, I don't know if it's because I don't know if Mike Varney produced all of them or had a hand in the production, or I think that a lot of them were all recorded at the same place. A lot of them have a similar sort of feel sonically to them, you know?
Yeah. You know, speaking of Steeler, the first Keel record, I think, was also
the early Keel stuff was on Shrapnel.
one of the bands I was involved with, not playing with them, but I was just personal friends and actually roaded for them a couple times. Vicious Rumors started on Shrapnel. There's a lot of good stuff on that label. A lot of good stuff out there.
Sure.
But, so there you go. That was my pick.
Awesome.
Good pick.
All right, Greeno, what do you got?
My pick is from 1988, and I'm kind of pushing it, I guess, a little bit. But whenever you brought this up, I was like, man, that's cool. You know, it's a cool topic. And several bands popped into my head, and Laz mentioned Griffin. That was one of the first ones.
Ooh.
And
I thought of
like,
doing Griffin. Griffin
Yeah.
was on my list. Flighted
awesome
Griffin
band.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
That and the first Jag Panzer, that kind of stuff.
Mm.
And it's like, you know what? I've had this record in my head for a while. I've been wanting to pull it and listen to it. It just, I don't know if it happens to you guys. I mean, just all of a sudden you start thinking about a band, an album or whatever. It's like, I need to pull that and play it. I haven't spun it forever.
Oh yeah.
You know, so I pulled it out and I was like, you know what? I think I want to use this one for American Steel. And 1988, first release, debut album, New York band, and it's Hitman.
Nice.
5-piece out of New York. And if you are a fan of early Queensryche, the EP and The Warning, it's that kind of thing. Awesome vocalist, killer riffs, some double bass stuff used very sparingly, and works fantastic. You know what I mean? Gang vocals. Awesome band. And it was kind of cool. I mean, I've always kind of been into this band. I've had this for a while. I think I kind of found them around the late 90s or something like that, early 2000s. And for doing this video, I thought, let me dig back into it, man. I've never really researched them, you know. And actually a very interesting kind of history here and there. It's like I said, they're a 5-piece band. Hopefully you can see everybody here. So I got kind of looking at the members, and the drummer, Chuck Corey, got a couple notes here I wrote down, was actually on the Takashi Kamikaze Killers EP that was on Mongrel Horde, another New York band, basically the label too. Yeah, the label that's basically known for Virgin Steel, you know, put out their early stuff. But this is Chuck here. And then I get looking, and there's a Craig Corey, which is the guy right here. That's his brother, evidently. I can't imagine being two Corys and not being related. But this is interesting, not amazing, but interesting that Laz brought up Shrapnel. We kind of got talking about that. The one of the guitar players and the bass player was in an early version of Attila, which come out on Shrapnel. Now they're not on the record, but from what I can find, they were, you know, in the band early on, it looks like, which is, yeah, kind of cool. And I dig this album. This, and Laz, this is one of those albums you're talking about on Shrapnel. You know, it's not a shredding album. It's just a killer 80s, you know, mid 80s metal record. Definitely worth checking out. And I've never heard this before, but the singer for this band is Dirk Kennedy. Have you guys ever heard of Dirk Kennedy before?
You know, the name is actually familiar, but I can't place it.
It didn't ring a bell with me, and I've never heard this mentioned before, but the research I got looking around and found was, looks like he was the original singer for Anthrax. And again, these are all, it's that New York scene. You know how those scenes work, man. Guys are jumping around, either here for the beginning or here in the middle. But so you got Neil Turbin coming in for the first album, and then, you know, we go on to Joey. But come to find out, you had this Dirk Kennedy, who's very much a Jeff Tate kind of sounded. He's not on Jeff Tate's level, but he's got it, man. He's pretty daggone close. Singing for those guys to begin with. I mean, that's pretty interesting. It'd be interesting to see if there's any kind of demos or anything for those guys. But anyways, back to Hitman. I found this interesting too. This come out on RC Records, a division of Road Racer, and also on Steam Hammer, a division of SPV. It's like all 4 labels are listed on the back of this thing. It's pretty crazy. I think this is the Road Racer US pressing. But like I said, man, and there's not a weak link in this band. Right off the bat, you're going to notice the vocals. Very, very cool. Killer drummer, 2 guitar players, awesome leads, really good riffs, man. And bass. You'll hear some crazy bass runs in here. Just the whole deal. You got everything right here. Now, you got 9 tracks. The only thing, unfortunately, is they decided to do a cover of Secret Agent Man, which wrong. That was a bad move. It's not that it sucked, but it's just like, come on, man, But and again, researching this was released in '88, and it was actually a demo they recorded in '86. So Steamhammer picked them up, wanted to put out the demo, brought him in, and had him record like 2 or 3 more songs to fill out the album. So that's, it's actually from '86 with some tracks from '88. But awesome band. Yeah, if you've never checked them out, and you're, like I said, if you're a fan of early Queensryche, the first 2, excuse me, definitely track this down. And this, I have a bootleg on CD that came out years ago. I'm sure it's been reissued officially. I think No Remorse reissued it on vinyl and maybe CD back around 2018 or so.
Was that their only album?
No, I was going to say they did one other album, and it's called Viva's Machine, and I only have it on CD. I don't think this has ever been released on vinyl as far as I know. I've never seen it, and I couldn't find anything for it. Now, there's definitely a change here. Same members other than the drummer, new drummer. So we're into '93 here. Things have changed, metal has changed. And this is still heavy, but they've definitely tried to go a little more commercial, and they've tried to squeeze into that alternative-y thing that's going on. They were searching, trying to find something to work. And to be honest, this is a skip. There's really nothing, I've listened to it a couple times, and I kind of went back, before the video here, refresh myself a little bit, and it's still not very good. But I mean, it's kind of cool. Just toss it in the collection. And evidently they're back together. I think they put an album out in 2020 last year. And I think the only original is the singer. The bass player passed away like 8 years ago or something. But very cool band,
Yeah, cool pick. When you mentioned them, I've got that on vinyl too, and this was one of those records. So it was like, didn't remember anything about it, so I had it on, spun it today, and I was like, yeah, this is a cool album. Like you said, great vocals, and it's got that kind of. I didn't do any research on it. I was thinking it was going to be like 84, 85. I'm surprised it was a little bit later like that, because it has a little bit of that vibe to it at times.
I'll be honest, I'm the same way, and I'm glad we're doing this video, because it kind of made me pull it out. Like I said, I've been thinking about it. It's like, I got to pull that eventually and listen to it. And I was thinking the same thing about 85, 86, which really, if you think about it, it was recorded in 86.
Yeah. So that makes sense then. Yeah.
Yeah. But and like I said, I felt like I was pushing it a little bit with the American Steel. It's definitely not a Griffin or Jag Panzer or anything like that.
Yeah.
But
it fits for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's got that, little bit of progginess to it, and very talented musicians. Everybody in the band's talented. I mean, it's a solid record. So that was my pick.
Awesome. I think their name, threw me off. In my mind, I was thinking that they were more like a hard rock type of thing, like it doesn't, when I first, I knew I had the record in my collection, and I was pleasantly surprised at how, classic metal sounding it was. I think that their name was maybe a little bit not that exciting.
Yeah.
All right.
That's something I'm definitely gonna have to check out. I've never even heard of them. So
yeah, it might be right up your alley, man.
Right on.
Yeah, a little bit of prog to it.
Yeah, cool pick. All right. Well, I picked a band called Abattoir.
Oh yeah.
They're from LA. This is actually their second record. They first appeared on, let me get my notes up here, Metal Massacre 4, with the song Screams from the Grave. And on here for this song, they had John Cyrus, who would go on to form, on vocals, would go on to form Agent Steel. So there's a little bit of an Agent Steel connection there, but I don't think he's on, this is their first studio album, and I'm pretty sure he's not on that. I think John Cyrus had gone on to Agent Steel by that point. So yeah, Vicious Attack is 1985. This is The Only Safe Place, which is 86. This is on Combat. We already mentioned Combat a few times. You know, they were kind of like had some thrashy type bands on their label, but this really isn't thrash. It's that gray area between metal and thrash. You know, we'll say speed metal. You know,
Right,
maybe
right.
along the lines of like Exciter or somebody like that. And I'm not the, I mean, I like thrash. I like the big thrash bands, the big four, but I don't go super, super deep with thrash. My heart is mainly with traditional metal. And so this stuff like this hits a real sort of sweet spot for me. It's faster, but it's not like double bass drum type thrash type stuff. The vocals on it here. So the guys in the band are Mike Towers on vocals, Danny Oliverio on guitar, Mark Caro on guitar, Mel Sanchez on bass, and Danny Anaya on drums. And from what I could tell, I couldn't find a lot of information on them. It didn't seem like any of them went on to any other bands. The vocals on it are, he's got kind of a high-pitched voice. It's got a little bit of a bright edge to it. I wouldn't call it like a super aggressive or anything, but he's got a little bit of grit to his voice, but it's in a pretty high range. Great guitar playing. The production on it is kind of classic for this kind of stuff. It's not lo-fi. It's certainly not like a really slick production. It sounds like a metal album from, you know, the mid 80s, from Combat in the mid 80s. Right, exactly.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, right, exactly. In fact, this is, you know, when I first started getting into records, this was the kind of stuff that was getting me really excited. Like I would find something like this, had never heard of the band. This would have been when I started like the early 2000s. So the internet, it wasn't as easy to find information on these obscure bands quite back then. So I was just grabbing stuff by the cover looks cool, the guys on the back look metal, you know, and I would buy these things, and I was able to get this stuff for like $10, you know, a record at that time. And I remember just being really excited finding stuff like this, good classic metal, catchy songs, you know, vocals with some melody to it. The album starts with a song, it's called Intro Beyond the Altar. And it's got like a classical guitar like thing, clean guitar thing. It's got like a bell sound in it. And I say this all the time in my videos. There's three things that get me going. Throw a classical guitar thing somewhere in a song. I love it. Throw a tolling bell somewhere in a song. I love it. And throw in like any kind of like wind or rain effect, you know, no, I got four things: wind and rain. And if you throw in a choir somewhere, you know, that also just, that's all because I trace all this back to, I have a Black Sabbath podcast, Into the Void, a Black Sabbath podcast, and we did a Blizzard of Oz episode. And I talked about how like I discovered that album when I was first getting into metal, and that's got checks off a whole bunch of those boxes. There's Revelation, Mother Earth, totally, there's a bell sound in that. There's classical guitar all over that record, Black Sabbath on a Sabotage album, Super Czar has a choir in it, anytime Diary of a Madman has a choir in it. So anytime I hear those things, it just screams epic. It just gets me it just gets me real excited. So this intro is super cool. Most of the record falls into that sort of speed metal thing, almost pushing onto thrash metal at times. Some of the songs that I think are cool on it are like Bring on the Damned. That's a cool, fast speed metal one. The Only Safe Place, the title track, it has an opening riff that has this like very Anthrax, like chug, 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 like chug to it, which is really cool. At times they go into sometimes a kind of like a slower mid-tempo thing that reminds me of like Armored Saint or Metal Church-ish a little bit at moments. Hammer of the Gods has a real Metallica Kill 'Em All like riff feel to the whole thing. Temptations of the Flesh on the second side is a little bit of a Grim Reaper, NWO, BHM, like a See You in Hell type of feel to it. Under My Skin is a speed metal with a cool kind of drops down to this like chugging, like halftime metal riff in it. So not a mind-blowing album, but it's cool because it straddles that line again between it's not quite thrash. You got a lot of fast stuff on it, but it's in a speed metal way. But you also get some mid-tempo stuff to it that it has that, again, that kind of like Armored Saint, Metal Church kind of feel and vibe to it. So Abattoir.
That's another good pick, man. I haven't heard those two albums for a long time.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah,
same thing.
Classic
and just hearing those song titles too, I've always thought of, how you can kind of gauge an album on the song titles.
Yeah.
Because there's some really bad stuff out there. These guys, okay, that I picked here, I should have gone over the tracks, but side one opens up with a track called 69, which is just an instrumental lead-in, basically. But then it goes into Bloodshot, Battle Stations, Fire and Fury, Killer on the Loose, which is probably my favorite track, Keeper of the Night, side two, Kissing the Black, Passion Web, Raise Some Hell, which is another great track, and then Snake Bite. So not knowing this record, if I picked this up in the record store and saw these guys and then read that track list, I'd say, I'd feel pretty safe buying this.
Yeah, it's true, man. When I was first collecting, that was like my thing. I would look at a record like this. All right, it's got a cool cover. Here's another thing that gets me going is any kind of thing with like smoke or fog or something. Again, Blizzard of Oz, Ozzy, right. There's like smoke in the background, right? All right, and then you flip it over, like, all right, these guys look cool, but you always got to be careful because you never know if they're one of these like hair metal crossover bands when I would be grabbing records, right? So that was always a thing to look at the song titles. If you see song titles like, She's Hot or like
Sticky Sweet,
driving down the road in my Camaro or something, like no. But when you see stuff like Beyond the Altar, Bring on the Damned, you're just like Night of the Knife. You're just okay. This is like, I know that it's gonna at least be like a 5 out of 10 just on cover and song titles alone. Right. It's checking off enough boxes that I'm. But there's nothing more disappointing than when I would be flipping through things like, wow, look at this. This is kind of cool. And then I turned it back, like, and it's all stuff like, She Used to Love Me, Love Letters to Susie. It's like, what?
I was going to mention, if you're digging for 80s metal albums, you always look on the back. If the word love is anywhere, you want to avoid that. If they
warning.
Yeah. If they
danger, Will Robinson, danger.
Also, another big keyword, lonely.
Yeah.
You see lonely, just walk away. Just walk away.
If they have a keyboard player, that's a red flag. Sometimes
Well,
it could work.
sometimes. Now,
Sometimes.
if the keyboard player has one of those keytar things,
Yeah,
then that's definitely like
right.
that's a warning. But if he's like back and he's got like a whole bunch of keyboards and he's like, maybe his hair is back.
Yeah.
Like he's got smoke around him or something, then it might
Yep.
be cool. That might be a good topic for another video. We should save that for like,
True.
warning signs to look out for when buying 80s metal records. There you go. All right. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate you coming here on the Lair. This was a lot of fun. Everybody out there, let us know in the comments down below if you've heard any of these bands. If you haven't heard any of these bands, definitely check them out. I have my podcast. I have to have you guys come on the podcast, the Lair of the Alchemist podcast. If you haven't, go over to Spotify, follow me there. I'm able to play full songs on there. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to have you guys on the podcast. Leave some comments down below. Let us know what you guys think of these really cool American steel bands. Thanks to Greeno and Laz for coming on the show. I'm going to definitely have these guys back. And everybody out there, until I see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.